5, 4,
At the end,
3,
discrimination. Yeah.
2, 1, go. Okay, so slightly. Okay. Agree, disagree. Okay, what are your reasons for agreeing?
I think that we can't just look at discrimination in the context of something that's happened in the past, and that we need to point to things that are happening today in order to combat them. We can't just look back at the Holocaust and say this is a terrible thing that's occurred. This is in the past. We're never going to do this again, and keep it as this evil in the back of our minds that's not going on in the present day. We need to look to what's going on now in order to fight against what's happened in the past and what will happen in the future.
Okay. What is your reason for disagreeing?
Well, this comes basically the crux is that discrimination is wrong, and that's kind of where my argument ends. Of course, there's things that we have to do to address the past, and I mean, racism is America's greatest sin for sure. So you had things like affirmative action, busing, to help black students and students of color. And that seems reasonable. What's coming out now is sort of the Ibram x Kendi, Nicole Hannah-Jones school of thought, where discrimination is everywhere, racism is everywhere. So we have to radically balance the system.
So the idea for you is that discrimination is wrong.
That's
Full stop.
I think I could stop right there. Yeah.
Okay. So, I forgot to say we were being recorded. Obviously, yeah. Obviously, yeah. Okay. So, do you agree with his argument that discrimination is wrong? Full stop.
Yes, but I think that calling something discrimination doesn't necessarily mean that it's discrimination. That's a concept that's applied from the outside in. Like, you can always say an action is discrimination, but I don't think any actor is saying that their action is discriminatory. Right? Like, what's an example of
Define discrimination. Go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead, define discrimination.
Discrimination. Well, in the context of this question, it would be, for example, preferential treatment in academic admissions for a group whose members have been historically oppressed.
I don't think that the people who are advocating for these policies would say that's discrimination.
And if they, okay. Oh, I see. So,
Yeah.
so you're saying that the policy. Let me make sure I have this correct, because now it's getting a little complicated. You're saying that if someone believes that, they would not say it's discrimination. They would say it's something else like equity.
Yeah, they would say it's fighting discrimination. They would be drawing the playing field at a different level than the person saying that affirmative action is discrimination.
Okay. So, to make sure I got it though, so they would be saying they would not be using the word discrimination, although we're describing exactly the same phenomenon.
Yes,
But it would still be discrimination.
maybe. They would think that their argument would be that affirmative action would be fighting discrimination. That it would be discriminatory to not promote people who are historically underrepresented in universities.
Okay. What do you have any thoughts on that? Because that's kind of complicated.
It is complicated. Well, it makes perfect sense. I think what you said, like in the context of the 1970s, coming out of the civil rights movement, you had a lot of schools that weren't even integrated yet. So you had busing, you had affirmative action to drive up college rates among minority students. The context of today, I mean, I know that quote, the only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. That's from some high-end academic, and their ideas are far beyond and don't really connect that much with the affirmative action programs and similar programs of 50 years ago. There's just I just don't have a connection between those two.
Okay, so does that seem to you to be like just linguistically disingenuous or just like, does that seem to be playing fast and loose with the word discrimination?
I think that the past discrimination might be getting defined differently than the present discrimination here. And the reason that the parties can't see eye to eye is because they're drawing different lines in the sand over what constitutes discrimination and what is discriminating against what. Like, is it the social, like the larger social apparatus discriminating against the individual, or is it the institution of a college discriminating against like a social set?
Got it. Okay, so I guess my question is, hold on, we're filled this time, but we can get you next time. So I guess my question is, if you and I agree upon the definition of discrimination and we don't have to listen, do you agree with that claim?
I don't know what you mean by that claim necessarily.
The only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. The only way to fix the fact that people have had legitimate instances of oppression and systemic bigotry, etc., is to discriminate against other people right now.
I think that the enemy here is discrimination as a whole, and that fighting against that means maybe drawing lines in the sand and saying is like affirmative action is the real point here. That's what.
No, it's not.
Right?
That's just one little
Okay.
teeny thing. I mean, it's just the whole, like he said, it's
Okay.
just like this whole infrastructure of stuff.
Okay. I would say.
But yes, it is
Yeah.
it is a part. Yes.
But if we're focusing on affirmative action, it's discriminatory to not accept that certain social groups have historically been underrepresented in higher education. It's discriminatory to claim that these factors don't exist and to just put everybody on a level playing field there.
How I'm almost tracking, but how is that discriminatory as opposed to just a descriptive statement?
Because you're not accepting that we're living in a broader social context here. You're not accepting that society doesn't put everyone on an equal playing field to begin with.
That would mean it's still discriminatory, but that discrimination is morally justified. It wouldn't mean that it's not discriminatory.
So do you think that discrimination can be morally justified?
Well, that's the nature of the whole question.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think that discrimination is something that we have to fight against, and to acknowledge it as an opponent, we might have to play by its rules.
So we may have to discriminate against some people. Oh, so that's the reason that you're on the agree.
I think that discrimination is the enemy that we're fighting against here.
So how come you're not on the strongly agree?
Because I don't fully understand the context of the question that you're
Okay.
posing to me.
Okay.
I just see a statement here.
Right.
I'm standing on agree. He's standing on disagree. I kind of sensed that there was going to be an agree-disagree here because of the way that this is set up.
Oh, no, I had no idea where he's going to stand.
Oh, cool.
No, I have no idea how
Yeah.
no, he was a former student too. But I didn't tell him where to go or anything.
Honestly, I enjoy challenging the structure
I know
of
you do.
the thing that I'm in.
That's good.
My personal beliefs here could land across the spectrum.
Oh, so you are willing to
I could make an argument from any one of these lines, but I feel like agree is what needs a platform here.
All right, let's try something as a critical thinking exercise. Did you have me for critical thinking?
I did.
Let's try something as a critical thinking exercise. I've never done this before, but let's try it. Would you guys switch lines?
Sure.
I'm going to give you a second to think. Make an argument for that line. And I'm going to ask you the same thing. I'm going to give you a second to think. Tell me when you're ready.
We can go.
Okay. Make an argument for that line.
So the trails of discrimination in the U.S., especially racial discrimination, we're still feeling that and experiencing that, and so we have to take action to level the playing field today, and that requires present discrimination along racial lines.
So there was a guy who's standing there who's disappeared now. That was kind of his argument.
Yeah, it's like the principle of equity and the social justice term, I would say. Like I mentioned before, Ibram X. Kendi, Nicole Hannah-Jones, those sort of people might make that statement and they'll defend it. And
Okay. Tell us, what would an argument be from this position?
So The only remedy to past discrimination is current discrimination. That's a statement that's just coming out of the gate and saying that discrimination is the enemy here. So we're fighting against discrimination. I don't believe that we can say discrimination which is sorry, I'm trying to
You take your time. You take your time. Yeah. It's a good critical thinking exercise.
It is.
I'm trying to give you something that this university will not.
Yeah. Okay, so we're fighting against discrimination. Discrimination is the enemy. We can't combat that. We can't combat like with like. We can't say that the answer to oppression is to oppress. We can't.
How come?
Because if you do that, you're just switching around the roles in a situation. You're doing it like this, right? You're just taking people as like pieces on a board game and switching them around. You're taking the oppressed and making them the oppressor. You're taking the oppressor and you're making them the oppressed.
In this case, nobody loses though.
Right. But this is a game.
Right.
Yeah, this is.
But in that case, someone would actually lose.
Yes.
And is it fair that some people lose at the expense of other people?
It's just the way the world works. It's not.
True. It is the way the world works, but is it fair?
Maybe fairness doesn't. Maybe fairness just depends on the individual and whatever they think is right and whatever promotes their own self-benefit.
Okay. So real quick before we end this one, what argument do you think someone could make to stand on strongly agree? Do you think that you could kind of conjure up one?
On strongly agree or strongly disagree?
Strongly disagree. And I'm going to come into the same thing for you in a sec.
So complete ideologue, strongly disagree. Discrimination is never the answer. Discrimination is always the enemy. Seeing people as separate from one another is always the institution that we need to be fighting against.
So I want to ask you a question. That's a really interesting thing you said. Is a complete ideologue, is it someone who stands on one of the extreme lines, or is it someone who's not willing to move a line?
I think that strong is just a word that you're attaching to how firmly you agree on something.
A confidence level.
Yeah, confidence level.
Yeah.
Whether or not you're willing to move seems more dependent on how willing you are to switch your mindset or to accept that other viewpoints might be right and that no one line can have all of the answers here.
So an ideologue is someone not willing to move off of a line. I'm thinking out loud here.
Yeah, not willing to accept that the other lines have valid points.
And would it be more or less likely that an ideologue would go to one of the outside lines?
I think it's not dependent. An ideologue could be neutral.
Yeah, they're just simply not willing. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Completely unwilling to compromise their neutrality.
Okay. Now that you've tried that, don't cheat.
No, I'm not cheating.
Now that you've tried that on that argument, how's that feeling for you? Not what are you thinking about it, but how is it feeling?
I always try to at least understand the opposing argument, even if I find it abhorrent. I try to, and that's against human nature. I'm not perfect. I mean,
Where'd you learn that skill?
I've always tried to have it, but yes, I've heard it in your class for sure. Critical thinking, yeah, that's one. Yeah, and I agree that an ideologue, you could be on one end of the pole and not be like William F. Buckley, most conservative guy. He had a show where he had communists on, socialists, people who wanted to legalize all drugs, and they had an honest conversation. There was no, they might trade playful jabs, but they're having a conversation. I don't think that makes him an ideologue, even though he was on one far end of the pole. I think it really matters that an ideologue is when you will not change,
So let's just real quick drill on that. Okay, so I'll interject it doesn't make him an ideologue, but it seems to make him intellectually courageous and brave, no?
Oh, yeah. I mean, in the context of when he was doing that in the 60s through the 90s, I think, the country was far more conservative, I would say, especially socially. And the fact that he was having conversations about legalizing all drugs, gay marriage, name the issue, going back into the 1960s on TV, I think that was courageous. And
We don't really see much of that anymore, do we?
no, I think that's a problem that does exist on both sides, because you have Americans, they'll sit and they'll huddle, they'll watch Rachel Maddow or they'll watch Sean Hannity. I don't know how many Americans would even be willing to watch a boring show on PBS where they actually discuss the issues and not necessarily tell people what they want to hear.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks for playing the game, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
having a game
Was
to
it
play.
fun?
Yeah, sure. I still need to do my homework before class, but yeah.
Did you get something out of it?
I think so. Did you get something out of it?
I did. You made me think. You made me think about it. So we became less about the claim and more about things that I've been doing so many of these that I was just riffing off of what you guys were saying, and it made me think about, like, maybe if I do this in the future, I should ask people to switch lines and like, it just made me think about different ways to approach the question and the problem. So yeah, it made me think, but not about the question.
Okay, cool.
Is that fair? Is that fair?
Yeah, that's how I felt about your class.
Yeah. Oh, well, good. That's perfect then. Cool. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. I hope it was fun. Was it fun?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Cool. Good. Yeah. Thank you.